Broker Daily Uncut.
Broker Daily Uncut.
News, views and opinion about what's shaping Australia's mortgage and finance industry.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Broker Daily Uncut. Jack Campbell, Alex Whitlock, Phil Tarrant, going a bit awards crazy at the moment. Will I see you guys this Wednesday at the Broker Innovation Awards and Summits, the inaugural?
I'm down there. Yeah, no, looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be good. I think we have a
big day.
pretty full house at the moment. It's going to be packed.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting new event, and we'll get into that. I think once sort of the day has taken place, but it's not there's too much to talk about in the realms of innovation. I'm looking at innovation across all of our awards portfolios, and also recognition around innovation, and also delivering content around innovation. We also had New Broker, which is sort of a very significant event for advocating broking, mortgage and finance broking, giving it kind of gives an opportunity for both those that have just entered the industry to get in and to learn some of that grassroots stuff, whilst also advocating broking to those that might be thinking about coming in. And I know the feedback from Michael and Annie and the team has been that it's been another really successful round, and I think at a time of growing sort of broker share, market share of a very, very rapidly evolving marketplace where you sort of engage with your customers and the way that people are looking to be engaged with and how they want to source their finance. It's a really important event.
Yeah, and I think events like that are as important as ever as the industry is shifting and changing. I know I spoke to the advisor team off the back of the New Broker last week, and they said it was a really successful day, the one in Sydney, and I actually had mates from outside of work, completely unrelated, that are brokers that were there, and yeah, were singing the praises of the event. So sounds like it was a successful day, and I know you guys have been, chatting with Anya Panek, is it, and in and around there, around MFAA, their research and whatnot. So it's good to see that.
Oh, the MFAA are always sort of at the forefront of. They're a great commentator on evolving broker market share. They've got very clear vision on so the preferences of customers. And myself and Michael caught up with Anya a couple of weeks ago, had a really good chat, and I think she's going to come in and do some stuff on some of our other brands, particularly sort of going out to the borrower market to help support and advocate, the role that brokers play. So I think she's going to be catching up with Phil, I think, on that later on this week. So watch that space, mate. SPI.
Be very good.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, you guys stay tuned. All that stuff coming up. We'll just throw to a quick break and we'll get into more news back after this. And we're back with Broker Daily Uncut now. Phil, I thought this one might be interesting for you. Actually, it was a reader that reached out and tipped me off on this one. Now, in the lead up to the election and the rate cuts and stuff, it was news crazy, and it's sort of settled a little bit more now. Now the news is all around which country's getting bombed today, and a little bit more depressing than it once was. But so you got to get out there and talk to people to get the news again. A reader reached out and said the new and foreign investment ban, there's a lot of investors bypassing the ban through the use of trusts. She said she was out at an open home, went to purchase a property, and then 2 days later got a call from the real estate agent saying it was sold. She said who bought it, and they said a foreign investor in Singapore had bought the place. And she said, well, isn't there a ban on foreign investors? And he said pretty casually that he'd bypassed it through trusts. Is that something that you've seen at all pop up in the work you do?
Really, I don't know if bypassing is the right language around it all. Foreign investors are attracted to the Australian property market because of the health and integrity of the market, and it's been a long attractive proposition for foreign investors. Now, the government's tried to put restrictions in place around foreign investors buying property here, and that would be via their own personal names. So, the intent is still there, and they still want to enter the Australian market, so they're using trust-based structures to do so. Now, I don't think that's illegal in any way. So I think it's just a vehicle in which they're still able to invest in property. I think where the issues lie is that it's a very emotive thing.
Yeah,
so.
I was going to. You're absolutely right. And let's be clear on what the focal point of this podcast. This is a podcast for brokers looking at the third-party distribution channel. And you're absolutely right, Phil. It's very emotive. And, when people feel they've lost out to somebody who ought not to be buying in Australia, it's a very emotional thing. But if you feel you've lost out to anybody, it's an emotional thing.
Yeah.
You and I both have complex trust structures. We've got a joint portfolio through that we sort of showcase through SPR. And we've got our own individual portfolios, and what I would say is going down the trust structure is so complex and onerous. There will be certain investors that will look to capitalise on that opportunity outside of Australia, but it is not an easy path.
Certainly not an easy path. And I think I read your story, which is a good story, by the way. It's very thorough. So it has got the emotional appeal, as in I'm losing out on my dream of home ownership because some foreign investors has come and bought my property is the story, right? But you pull that apart, the government is very aware of foreigners using trust or company-based structures to buy property in Australia. Now, we have this sort of foreign investors sort of review board, which is a cohort of government bureaucrats that set the rules, but then also police the rules around trying to protect Australian, inverted commas, property assets. Now, a lot of that will be directed towards large commercial purchases or large agricultural purchases. And you see there's a lot of oversight in rightfully foreigners buying large tracts of Australian agricultural real estate, and you see pushbacks over the years, and I think rightfully there should be oversight on that. When it comes to residential trust-based purchasing for Aussies and investors, I think the example in your story was like a 2-bedroom apartment in somewhere or other, so like a real cookie cutter meat and potatoes type property. So one side of the discussion is, well, someone's leveraging trust-based structures to skirt around the rules and regulations in order to secure property. And I think the point there was that there was some Aussie resident packaged up or bundled up as part of the trust. Now, if you're investing in trust, it's a very expensive process to do. Not only do you need to set the trusts up, and those trusts need to be accounted for, there's also a lot more cost when it comes to holding property inside of trust if you are a foreigner. There's land tax is taxed at a completely different rate. I think it's a 4% premium for foreigners who are holding property in trust. Now, who gets the benefit of that, right? It's more money to the government coffers. So murky, difficult to manage. It's hard to balance the emotion around it.
It's just a reality of the whole tax system, that there are, clear cut and blurred areas. It's not grey, it's just blurred, and you can't legislate 100% and get it right, because if you do try and deal with every small corner, you end up punishing and hurting other people. And you need foreign investment to a certain degree.
You do. They're outliers, right? As well. This is, I wouldn't say this is a rampant,
it's not right,
situation. I think you get fringe cases around this. And you know what? Smart operators, if you want to call them that, inverted commas, will find ways to still do what they want to do within the letter of the law and with the right finance. And your story says to it, with some smart advice from an accountant or another professional, this is going to happen.
It's quite funny, depending on what side of the fence that you sit on. So, having spent many years working in Hong Kong and seeing Western businesses looking to operate in China, you've got very, very strict rules and regulations around owning and operating a business in China. And so if you're a foreigner, what do? You look around how to get around those particular rules. You end up with, and same for a lot of countries, right, Phil? You end up with a domestic partner, to set up an organisation.
It happens all the time, and it's encouraged in many of those places. Yep. What I was saying is, to conclude this, is that the Australian government, the state governments, have put the flags up. These are just an analogy. They put the flags up on the beach and said, swim between the flags. I would say, what's going on there? People are still swimming inside the flags. They might be towards the edges of them, but I can't see any sort of drastic changes to police. It's when there's nefarious activities going on in and around that, and that would be taking place in some fringes, that we need to be right across it.
But the other thing as well, if you're looking at sort of AML type stuff, like the trust structures are onerous. The transparency around who's setting the trusts up, it's a lot harder if you're up to no good. It's a lot harder to do it via a trust structure. I would say. Look, I'm not saying it's it's absolutely 100% watertight, but it's a reality of buying.
Well, it's only come in since April, these new laws, so, time will tell whether or not more and more cases will pop up, but we'll be across it on Broker Daily anyway.
Be interesting to know if they bought for cash or whether they financed the purchase. But
well,
the AML needs to be right across this, right? This is why we have these governance structures around it, because Australia is an attractive proposition to park your dough.
Well, we'll be across it on Broker Daily, regardless of what happens. We'll just throw to a quick break. We'll be back after this. And we're back with Broker Daily Uncut now. A little bit, something in the news that was a little bit more, egregious for brokers, I suppose, was ASIC targeted predatory lenders in its sort of plan for the future, what it plans to do throughout the rest of 25. Predatory lenders has been a bit of a buzzword that's floating around with a lot of the private lenders going around. But interestingly, targeted brokers in this, light shining that it was putting on predatory lenders, and said they're not immune from misconduct and it will be focusing a lot of its attention on brokers. Do you think that's a little bit unfair?
Oh, it is what it is. They're going, well, we should be looking at brokers. Okay, well, you go find us some brokers that are involved in predatory lending. And look, I have no doubt that there will be one or two out there. You look at any profession or industry, whether it's lawyers, you get one or two lawyers that don't do the right thing, whether it's the medical profession, and I'm sure it will be the same for brokers. But you're drawing such a long, you've got to be really clear, right? What you end up talking about is, it would be to the extent where you're a criminal organisation, not a predatory broker. I think, you're either going to be involved in some sort of syndicated crime where you have a broker, a lender, an agent, and there's a whole bunch of people doing things that they've just taken up that mantle because they are acting criminally. I think it's for us, we know, to be a predatory broker, your customer comes to you, they need finance for a property. How predatory are you going to be? There's such strict laws around how you provide finance and advice to your customer. It's pretty, there's much easier ways.
What's ASIC saying, that brokers are a conduit?
They're saying, watch out, we're going to be looking at you.
So brokers are a conduit for predatory lenders? Is that what
they said that they're often involved with a lot of the problems they have, but then they also went on to said that they're largely compliant brokers and there isn't too many complaints against them.
What's their definition of a predatory lender?
It's usually a low cost, sort of like the smaller loans, and they get people trapped in those and maybe like shouldn't be servicing
type
them.
Lenders and all that
that kind of stuff is usually what they're referring to when they say predatory lender. I think brokers were just a little bit blindsided. I think
it's
the
probably
comments are
looking at. I think it's probably more likely to be in and around the commercial space, I would say, broadly, because I think for mortgage lending, for residential property, it's so clear cut. And again, you've got two things, right? You've got brokers that are negligent in understanding who they're dealing with as a lender, right? And they end up making the wrong recommendation because they don't know. Or you've got brokers that are acting in a criminal and deliberate way, right? And there are not many of those, and it's pretty hard to do that in residential lending. And residential lending is fairly straightforward. Commercial, however, if you have a predatory lender that goes under the radar, and then a broker without really understanding the commercial landscape sees a commercial solution without knowing how to evaluate all of the commercial opportunities, can unwittingly recommend a product that is not good for the commercial borrower.
Yeah, happens. I think good to have oversight on it. It's nice for ASIC to actually say, hey, we're watching this space. I think that's prudent for them to do so, but I don't hear much of this going on, and nothing really to see here, I reckon.
Yeah, well, it seems like every time there's a report coming out of any regulatory body cracking down, always they say that.
But they're doing their job, right? They're doing their job. They're going, hey, listen, we're watching you, because if you are, if you think there's any little dark corners to hide in, I think by just saying we're going to be scrutinising brokers, I welcome it, And I just don't think that they're going to find a great deal there. But keep the light shining in every quarter. It just makes it that less palatable to look at creating nefarious opportunities, particularly in and around mortgage broking. Yeah, definitely. Well, brokers, if you're heading along to the Broker Innovation Summit on 25th of June at the Telstra building this Wednesday, come and chat to us. We'd love to talk a bit more about it. I'll have a podcast booth set up, so come jump on a podcast and
get your name out there and your thoughts out there. But unfortunately, all we have time for today. Thanks again for listening. If you want to visit more content, brokerdaily.au. If you want to reach me directly, editor@brokerdaily.au. Thanks for listening.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.